Joining us right now via Zoom chat is Father Frank Pavone from Priests for Life. Good morning to you, Father.
Good morning. Great to be with you again.
Yeah, praise be to God. Good to see you. Thank you for your time today. I was just telling everybody that tomorrow we actually have two FBI whistleblowers that are going to be on our program to talk about what we see as an overreach and abuse within the DOJ and the FBI. I'd like to get your opinion on this. There's been well over 100 attacks of pro-life pregnancy centers, Catholic churches, organizations, and to date, as far as I know, there's been 0 arrests, even though like Jane's Revenge is taking credit for some of this stuff. So it's like you don't even have to go that far to look for who's done this. But apparently that's under investigation, but no arrest. But pro-lifers, on the other hand, are being visited at their front doors by men in tactical gear. What say you, Father Frank Pavone?
Well, there's no doubt that this is an ideologically driven FBI and DOJ. There's these and so many other instances, examples. But it's the problem of the administration. The entire federal administration now under the Democrat Party is like this. And they've told us. See, this was one of the things that, back in, of course, this started happening long before the September 1st speech that Biden gave. But we were sounding an alarm, when he gave that speech, criticizing half the country. And it doesn't matter if a believer is, listening to that speech and they say, he's criticizing former President Trump, he's criticizing the MAGA movement, he's criticizing the Republicans. That doesn't involve me, a believer might say. But a lot of believers will say, hey, yeah, that he is talking about me. But those who believe in the values we hold, those who treasure the faith that we profess, need to understand, yeah, he's talking about you. And to talk about people like this in ways that he did, where he says it's a threat to the republic, undermining democracy. Well, you don't say those things about people from the highest levels of government and then expect that the highest levels of government are going to treat them equally and respect their rights. So that speech is very revealing, and we have to take a step back and see that it's articulating the driving philosophy. In fact, if you look at the strategy memos and the party platform documents of the Democrat Party, when you and I talk about religious freedom, and that includes the freedom to protest abortion and to save the unborn, because we're doing it for religious reasons as well as for basic human reasons. They see that as discrimination, and this is not something we're concluding. Their own documentation and strategy memos are saying this. So it's time really for the church and believers and pro-lifers to realize we are. It's no exaggeration to say we are in a stage here of persecution under the government of the United States of America, and all these sad examples are showing that.
It definitely feels like lopsided justice. I mean, when we break the law, we can expect the outcome of that. It's a reasonable, logical progression. But when you see people breaking the law and there is no ramification, there is no consequence, nobody ever does anything, it does seem incredibly lopsided. Now, in this case, you know some of these people personally. You spent a lot of time with them. Tell us about them.
Well, first of all, of course, Mark Houck, the pro-life activist from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia area, a leader. He's involved with 40 Days for Life. In fact, I'll be talking to him later this morning, and did an interview recently with his attorney, Peter Breen. The man is simply a life-loving, faithful husband and father. Eva Edel, who survived a concentration camp, I've been praying with her on the streets of America since the beginning of my Priests for Life work. We were together in so many places in front of abortion facilities where she talked about how, her time in the concentration camp brought her to Jesus and brought her to an even deeper appreciation of the need to speak out for the vulnerable. She's a holy woman. Cal Zastro is a firebrand, and he goes across America And the word that comes out of his mouth most frequently is revival. Revival. He preaches about spiritual revival. He's a preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It reminds me of St. Paul, what he says in the Acts of the Apostles. It's interesting, isn't it, how we read these scripture passages, with great reverence and devotion, and yet sometimes we don't. If we saw the behavior that those passages are describing, sometimes we don't recognize it. And then there's Chet Gallagher. The man was a law enforcement officer. He was asked one day to go arrest pro-life Christians who were blockading an abortion mill.
Wow.
He was convicted in conscience. He was convicted in conscience when he saw them sitting there explaining why they were doing what they were doing. Mm-hmm. You know what he did? He turned around and sat down with them.
Wow.
And joined in the blockade.
Wow.
Chet Gallagher, again, I've known him for decades. The man is a man of such faith. I mean, you take these four people, and it's like, this is the fruit of exactly what the church is trying to foster when she gives us the examples of the saints, when she exhorts us in the liturgy and in the teachings of the church to give ourselves for Christ, to have zeal for the gospel. And let me just point out one more thing. These people are being charged by the FBI with violations of the FACE, with the exception of Mark, with the violations of the FACE law. Now, I remember in 1994 when President Bill Clinton signed this bill into law. And by the way, I told Mother Teresa about it. I visited with her in Calcutta just a few months after Clinton signed this law. Now, this law makes it a federal crime for people to peacefully intervene and blockade abortion facilities. And one of the things we said when that law was passed was, hey, wait a minute, this is overreach. There are already laws to deal with trespass, if that's what they're concerned about. And as far as any kind of intimidation or God forbid, violence, there are already laws to deal with that. Why are you singling out people who want to end abortion and making this a federal crime? Now, the Republicans amended the bill and made it include churches and pregnancy centers, interestingly enough, and then that just highlights the lopsidedness of this that you pointed out.
Hold that thought right there, Father. I'm sorry, but we're right at a network break. Father, just before the break, you were talking about how you were sharing with St. Teresa of Calcutta the moment when this sort of became, this FACE Act thing became law. That's where you left off. Did you want to pick up there?
It was in 1994, and I described to her, what this law did to peaceful pro-life activists. Here's what she said to me. Here's her exact words. Father, if we had that law here in India, I would have been thrown in jail many times.
Wow. Because
I go to the places where the abortions are done, and I take the women by the arm and I pull them away. And I imagine that scenario. Mother Teresa was so short, and she would go and she would literally take these young moms away. And she said, and I would bring them to our sisters and say, you have hope for your life and your baby. So, I mean, she was just astonished that this would be happening. And I'd like to ask the FBI today, would you be willing to arrest Mother Teresa? Because that's what you'd have to do if you're going to continue down this path.
Father, I was talking to our good friend, Attorney Brent Haynes, about the FACE Act violations. And I was, this is just something that's been on my mind. It's driving me crazy. How is it that these pro-life organizations are attacked, firebombed? I mean, these are some extreme examples, right? And they're happening. And yet it's almost nothing has happened. I asked Brent, and I said, do these pregnancy centers, are they protected by the FACE Act? And he was telling me that no, only the abortion centers pretty much are the ones who are protected by the FACE Act violations. It just seems really, really convenient, doesn't it?
Yes, well, de facto, only the abortion facilities end up being protected. But if you look at the FACE law, it was expanded, and health care services, reproductive care services, the argument can be made that that violence against both churches and pregnancy centers should be prosecuted under this law. But we see the lopsided, unfair treatment, and you can see it from another perspective too. When in the mid '90s we had a couple of instances of abortionists being shot. Happened in Florida, happened in Brookline, Massachusetts, and upstate New York. Bill Clinton, again, at that time, sent out federal marshals to the other abortion facilities as a precaution. It's like, oh my goodness, what a difference between their reaction to protect these abortion centers when there was violence at one or another place, and the utter lack of response and lack of similar protection being offered to these pregnancy centers under this administration.
I am very intrigued, and I'm looking forward to our conversations tomorrow with these two whistleblowers out of the FBI, both Catholic, both are very concerned about the direction in which they're being used as pawns. This has been something, because I know Mark, I've known Mark since 2007. He and I were just together before he got arrested, actually. We spent the weekend prior to the Friday he got arrested. We were together in Arizona. And it always struck me. I serve in the Marine Corps. I know what it means to do one's duty, to follow orders. But it always seems strange that very highly educated men and women who serve in our FBI, people who I imagine don't set out to have these sort of political agenda biases, simply go along with this and simply follow those rules. Yeah. It always struck me as like, golly gee whiz, not one person stood up and said, hey, I think this is probably way too much. Maybe he'll just turn himself in. And then we learned that he offered to turn himself in 3 months before then, and they just simply decided to knock and bang on his door instead. How do you see it from that perspective, Father Frank?
You know, we always are responsible for our actions. Even when we're under obedience, we are responsible for deciding that we are going to follow a certain order, carry out a certain command, and we never are exempt from the duty to evaluate it in our own conscience before we take that step. So I agree completely with what you're saying. And here's the other thing people have to understand, including those that work in these agencies: what damage is this doing to the American public and our ordinary, legitimate activities for law enforcement or for investigations? Because if this is happening now, and more people are understanding now that this has become a pattern, that law enforcement agencies and other bureaus are being used against us because of our beliefs, our religious views, our political views, well then how does that inspire confidence in the American people when the FBI needs to ask people questions in the course of its legitimate business? People are not going to want to cooperate. And because now we're forced to be in a position where we've got to advise people, hey, listen, if the FBI comes knocking at your door, don't talk to them. And the reason we have to start advising people like that is you don't have to answer any questions to any of these agencies to justify your political, religious, or pro-life beliefs. You don't have to do that. Because what's happening is if the people do that, because they want to be cooperative citizens, that information ends up being used against them. So it's like this is undermining the confidence the American people should have in these institutions. They don't anymore, and that makes it hard to do legitimate business.
Well, let's talk about post-Roe. Now that we're over 100 days since the Dobbs decision out of the Supreme Court, what is your report card for our country now? At this point of the situation.
Well, a lot of protection of life is happening. We've got about 13 states now that are protecting the babies from the beginning of their lives. That's pretty awesome. We were waiting for decades for, what would be the first abortion-free state. And now all of a sudden we've got over a dozen of them. We got another 5 states or so that are protecting babies from the time that the heartbeat is detected. And you've got altogether about 30 states that have some kind of meaningful gestational limit to abortion. In other words, it's going to stop at this particular point in pregnancy. Of course, then you have a handful of other states that allow it all the way through. So we're making great, and the fruits are immediate and long-lasting for the lives that are actually being saved. At the same time, we have not yet even begun to appreciate what a great victory the Dobbs case is. And what I mean is the foundation has been taken out from under all the court decisions at every level of our court system and all the laws, including the FACE law, by the way. The foundation has been taken away from these because in as much as they were passed, enacted, or decided based on Roe and Casey. Well, now Roe and Casey are bad law. They're gone. And any challenge to these other court decisions, any challenge to these laws is going to have much more probability of success because, again, the basis is gone. So we're still in a little bit of a period of unrest on both sides of the issue because our first duty here is to really deeply understand what the Dobbs case said. We have a resource on that, SupremeCourtVictory.com. I want to encourage folks to go there and read and watch the videos and learn because we can't plan our next steps of strategy unless we really deeply understand the change that the court has brought about, and it's a good one.
There were some surprises, I would say, so far. Kansas, I did not see. We're talking heartland country here. We're talking about, people call it flyover country. I call it the heart of our country. Kansas, not trying to do away with abortion there. Did that surprise you?
Well, not really, because this is these ballot initiatives are actually very hard to win. Because it's not, when you think about it, it's not the legislative process where people can really have substantial debate and witnesses and counter arguments and amendments and documents, and the public can really be informed about what, in all its detail, this particular legislative proposal means. When you have these ballot initiatives, you're talking about it. You got an artificial deadline. And it's a popular vote of the people. So if you've got, a very, very left-leaning population in one of the big cities, that can drag the whole country with it. If you have money coming from the outside, which is what we always see, we see money coming from the outside, from the pro-abortion people to promote misleading slogans, false advertising. And that's how the other side often wins these amendments. So it shouldn't be too much of a cause for concern. We're going to see a couple of these others on the ballot in November 8th. But really, like the Dobbs case said, it's the people and their elected representatives that need to hash out the abortion policy. And we're going to make much more progress in the legislatures than we will on some of these ballot initiatives.
Were there any other surprises to you? I guess the case in Indiana, that's just a judge appointment holding everything back there. I mean, it's not like though the citizens are wanting abortion as much as just the judge appointed is blocking the law.
Well, what people need to understand, the strategy of the other side is, let's hide behind the judges because then again, we don't have to deal with the legislative process that makes people really think about abortion and its effects. So they hide behind the judges. Now, they can't hide behind the Supreme Court anymore. So now they're trying to hide behind the state courts or the state constitutions. And that's why we see some of these ballot measures. It's not going to work ultimately. These judges, again, are relying on concepts that were put forth under Roe and Casey. For example, if you think you can find a right to abortion under the right to privacy, well, the arguments from Dobbs should settle that issue. No other assertion of privacy that we all would acknowledge involves the taking of another life. This was one of the key arguments the court made. Likewise, the history. If there's never been a constitutional right to abortion asserted in American history, well, that includes Kansas history, Michigan history, Indiana history. These judges are going to start to realize that they can't go down this path anymore. These arguments have been refuted by the Supreme Court, and those Dobbs arguments are going to start to have an impact even in these lower courts. That's why I say it's still a period where we're unsettled. They're acting according to a pattern they've been trained to act in for 50 years. The judges eventually are going to learn how to apply Dobbs, because remember now Dobbs is precedent, and they need to respect and apply it.
You got about 15 seconds, but do you think Congress will pass a pro-abortion legislation?
No, I don't think they'll try. The Democrats will try, and they've tried for decades to make a federal law that erases all limits on abortion. It's not going to succeed because the American people want more restrictions on abortion, not less.
All right. Praise be to God. Father Frank Pavone, Priest for Life, priestforlife.org. Check him out online. God bless you, Father. Thank you for your time today. We're always grateful to have you.
Thank you.
All right, that's going to do it for hour number 1 of Catholic Drive Time. If you can join us in the second hour, we would love to have you. Tito Edwards from BigPulpit.com is going to be on. And then, of course, we have our game show, Fear and Trembling, plus an after show, and so much more is coming your way. Do join us online if you can, grnonline.com/C